Hey, welcome to Deep Dive. I'm Joshua, the editor and producer of the show, and this is actually the final episode of the archival series we've been working through over the past 4 weeks, where we've been looking back at previous Deep Dive episodes, older sermons, and stories that I believe have powerful and impactful messaging and that pair really well with the current sermon series we're working through, Everyday Rhythms. This past Sunday, Pastor Bob had a great message on eating with people, and how by sharing a meal with someone, we can really show that they matter. And God and his kingdom can do amazing works through that. And so in Bob's sermon, which if you haven't checked out yet, I will link down below. Highly recommend checking it out. We had a wonderful story from Michaela. She's a youth leader here at St. Albert Alliance Church. And she had this great story of how she would go out with students to coffee and invest in their lives. But what we didn't get to hear, what didn't make the cut, was actually her own personal story about how she went for coffee with many different people, including Pastor Josh here on staff at our church, and that it was really impactful for her and how she felt honored. So I will let her tell her story. Let's listen in to Michaela.
Hi, my name's Michaela. I am a youth leader here at Stack. I've been attending Stack for a couple years now, and I guess I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. I was thinking about this question before coming today, and I was really trying to pinpoint like a momentous occasion where someone was like, I want to take you out for coffee. I want to get to know you. I want to invest in your life. And what I kept coming back to was the first time that Pastor Josh actually took me to coffee. He had just gotten hired at um, Sturgeon Alliance in Gibbons, and he was making his rounds, getting to know all his leaders and find out where everyone was at in their faith and how everyone was feeling about serving. And I just remember that being an awesome start of our working relationship together, but also of our friendship, where he just listened to me, share my story, and was super encouraging in just how he was invested in that time and how there wasn't a time limit or he didn't have to rush off, and he asked good questions. Um, and then when I think about like other times that I've been to coffee with people because they've asked me, it's always been in the same vein. It's always been where Pastor Josh is interested in catching up, or I get to meet Abby and see how things are going with her just starting out in her role at Stack, and just wanting to see where everyone's at and how everyone's doing. And I've really appreciated those times of just being on the receiving end of someone asking me to coffee. I think that in that moment, I feel super honored because being someone who has done the asking numerous times, being asked just feels like, wow, like, thank you for wanting to spend time with me. Thank you for, like, for taking time to get to know me a little bit. Thank you for noticing the work that I've been doing, or that I need to talk, that I'm not okay. Whatever the reason is behind the ask, it just feels like, oh, thank you. Thank you for noticing.
Up next, we're going to look at a sermon series we had last year called Story of Grace, where we heard from multiple different people, their testimonies, their story on how God's showing them grace or how God's using them to show grace to others. And I thought a perfect example that lands super well with eating with other people or providing meals is Judy. She has a heart for people and she loves serving food and being in her community. So let's listen in to Judy's story.
Hello everyone, my name is Judy Bokenfor, and I've been a member at the St. Albert Alliance Church for approximately 15 years. Before Christ called me, I went through 3 failed marriages, lived in a 4th relationship of common law, and found that they became more degraded and more abusive as time went on. And God rescued me And in that place of being reestablished with my children and my grandchildren, there was so much grace given to me. And God did all of that through Freedom Session. And so there was this wonderful healing that did happen. And knowing that those things were going on, it was an opportunity to recognize just how good God is. And one of my favorite verses is Romans 5, verse 20, that where sin abounds, grace abounds much more. And I'm constantly reminded of how good and how gracious our God is. And I think the thing that really amazes me so incredibly much is that God, when we look at Jeremiah 29:11, that he has plans to prosper us, not to harm us, to give us a hope and a future. And that amazes me. When you think of his magnificence and how he's always bringing things together, I'm just overwhelmed of how good and how gracious he really is. And I see grace, even how it flows in my building. There are ladies who give and make peanut butter sandwiches, they make muffins. There is grace through the secondhand store giving me clothes to be able to bless others with them. And the really cool thing, I think, is that there's a surprise every time. Like, how many loaves of sandwiches are we going to get? How many dozens of muffins are we going to get? Like, who's going to contribute? What's that going to look like? And in the clothes, like, what are we going to get? People have come to know about what's going on and doing these amazing things. So they leave me bags of clothes down in the front of my car in the parkade. So it's like, okay, surprise. What have we got inside the bags of clothing, right? And I think that the people in the building really, really love to contribute. And so knowing that these kinds of things are happening and the opportunity to be able to go downtown, again, you see grace overwhelming people that are there. I think that one of the things that I find interesting and saddening in a sense is that if you haven't driven to a place where you see the needs of people that are physically sleeping on the streets, on pavement, in a tent, you really have no idea of what it is to be cold or to be in a situation like that. And so going down there and having an opportunity to give them, sandwiches or gloves or mittens and those things, there is that expression of joy and hope on their part. And when you have the opportunity to pray for them and you can hug them or hold them, and in that moment when it's eye to eye, and you tell them that God hasn't forgotten them and that they do matter, they are made in his image and that they are loved and they are valued and that we see them, there is that moment, there is that hope between you and them. And I think that that's really what it's all about. And so to me, that is what grace is. It's having a little and taking it somewhere and sharing it with the few that you can. But I think the number one thing for me is encouraging people that you always think, well, what can I do? It's only me. Like one loaf of bread feeds 8 people, or however you want to look at it, but there's always an opportunity to do something. And so I think that that's the exciting thing for me is, what are we going to get? Where are the nuggets? How are we going to use them? And how are we going to love others with them? So that's basically, I think, what fills my heart and my passion to love others and to do good.
Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Deep Dive. If you have any comments or questions, please comment them down below or reach out to us on any of our social media. We'd be happy to keep that conversation going with you. Quick note, we're going to take a little hiatus next week, a little break. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with more of your regular scheduled programming with all of Pastor Kirk, Pastor Josh, and Pastor Bob, all discussing the finale of our sermon series, Everyday Rhythms. It's bound to be a good one. I recommend you checking it out. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and we will see you all on the next episode of Deep Dive.